Sultan Sharif Ali Yunisa, Negara Brunei Darussalam. And I like her personal statement, her CV, stating that the last sentence I especially like. This is actually from the Prophet Muhammad SAW, saying that those who remember death often and have best prepared for it with good deeds, those are the wisest. Okay, and I hope we are going to be more wiser after her sharing session today. And she is currently, as I mentioned earlier, she is currently teaching in UNISA and has a vast experience as well as professional qualification and membership in related areas, especially in Islamic financial institutions. And she has been working in various universities, okay, and also visiting lecturer at Osaka University in Japan. Saya tak boleh nak baca banyak sangat ni. And she is also Syariah Advisory Committee Consultant of Financial Institutions. A list, okay, I have a long list of banks in her CV, so I think I will skip that. And she is also a corporate advisory panel of experts to another list of organizations, okay. Very interesting, she is also in Halalan Toiba Center, okay, so she is actually doing work in that area as well. And she also have she has also done invention in products, technology-based products. Okay, and I think without further ado, I will now ask Dr. Hakimah to start the presentation on SDG and Islamic finance. Okay, the floor is yours, Dr. Hakimah.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Inshallah, today we are going to discuss on the SDG, especially in relation to Islamic finance. And first of all, I would like to thank to UTM for inviting me on this session. And the SDG, basically the concept that was born by the United Nations Conference on the SDG, Sustainable Development in Rio de Janeiro in 2012. And the objective was to produce a set of universal goals that meet the urgent environmental, political, economic challenges, as well as the problems that we are currently facing to make the world a better place to live. And we can recall before the SDG, we have come across several agendas and initiatives taken by the United Nations as well as the agencies from the United Nations. For example, beginning with the SRI, Social Responsible Investment, moving forwards for the MDG, the Millennium Development Goals, and later we have the ESG, Environmental, Social and Governance. And now we are currently riding over the platform of SDGs. And it's basically for 15 years, we have seen MDGs growth processes and progress in several areas. For example, reducing income poverty, proving much needed access to water and sanitation, driving down child mortality and drastically improving maternal health, as well as on the gender's rights. So in light of that, we can see that sustainability, referring to the capacity to maintain some entity outcome or progress over time, and it's basically sustainability, the idea to seek and prioritize, integrate social, environmental and economic models in addressing human challenges in a manner that will continually be beneficial to human. And it also refers to the meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability to future generations to meet their own needs, as well as we must have the concerted efforts towards building inclusive, sustainable and resilient future for people and planet. And it is crucial to harmonize these three core elements: economic growth, social inclusions, and environmental protections. And the promotions of sustainable, inclusive, and equitable economic growth basically creates greater opportunities for everyone to reduce inequalities, raising basic standards of living, fostering equitable social development and inclusions, and promoting integrated and sustainable management of natural resources and ecosystem. Ethical banking that we have been being started in 18th century. For example, like the Quaker in the United Kingdom refrained from investing in industry they were morally opposed, such as tobacco, alcohol, gambling, and the slave trade. So this was the first negative ethical screening of investment, later to become known as social responsible investment. So this has been continued until 1920s, where Methodist Church of North America screening out all those negative activities and call them as sin stocks from their investment portfolios. And from SRI, social responsible investment, we see the route went to ESG, environmental, social, and governance, which emerged from the socially responsible investing, where the money isn't put in companies that engage in environmentally and socially irresponsible practices. I believe these kind of approaches already have, the idea has been reinvented in our green economy as well as green financing. And if we refer again that the Methodist movement protested against investing in companies that made weapons, tobacco, and etc. And the similar movement also took place in 1960s in the light of Vietnamese War. And difference between the ESG and SRI lies within the fact that investing based on the ESG criteria is considered to make financial sense, as well as and the not solely tied to the moralistic stance against unethical businesses. If we compare what basically the MDG and the SDG, you see the MDG comes with only 8 goals, while the SDG with 17 goals. And number of target is 21 on the MDGs, while we have under SDG is 169 targets. And they have indicators, 60 indicators under MDG previously, but now SDGs we have 232 indicators. The MDG is more on the social, while the SDG scope is more on the economic growth, social inclusions, and environmental protection. And they are targeting, or MDG is targeting the developing countries, particularly the poorest, while SDGs focusing on the entire world, including poor and rich. And this has been produced by the group of experts, while SDG basically comes under the process of an agreement among the members of the United Nations, as well as the civil society and the other stakeholders. Now, the SDG 8, goal number 8, actually to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all, is basically under the SDG goal number 8. And it comprises of the green economy, which includes the transitions to economy that are low to carbon, resource efficient, and socially inclusive. The moderator, I believe the screen has been shared to all the participants. Are we using the share screen, Prof?
Yes, Dr. Hakima, yes.
So they are getting the slide. They're getting access to the slides.
Yeah, I think they now at the first slide. So if you want to move to the next slide, you just say next, then I will move to the next slide.
Okay.
Provide 90%. We don't require.
Okay. Now I'm at the slide number 8, Doctor. All right. The green this goals number 8 on decent work and economic growth basically comes with 3 agendas. First is to promote the green economy, and next is for the sustainable tourism and employment, decent work, and social protections. Which is related to Islamic finance, is on the green economy, which has the moving forward to have all this green financing, green economy under the umbrella that we want to have more socially responsible financing. In this case, for example, like we have the right, the financial institutions have the right to stop giving funding to the factories that cause irrigations or cause water pollutions to the society. This also should be part of the initiatives that taken under this green financing. And the next slide, Prof. The Maqasid Sharia and the economic growth as under this Islamic finance, we actually driven by the several principles. Maqasid to protect the life, intellect, property, religion, and nasab. And in terms of economic growth, the circulation of wealth in the market space and business transactions, actually the objective of Sharia is to make the wealth available in the society members by right and enable everyone who deserve it to own it, right? And this Maqasid Sharia perspective is actually to keep the circulation of the wealth in the market through exchange and business transactions and avoid any types of monopoly of monetary in few of hands of people. And we can see that this has been written in the Al-Quran, verse 59, 7, so that it may not be a benefit going round and round among such of you as may already be rich. And Ibn Mashhur also has commented on this verse, saying that the idea of wealth is actually going round and round, refers to the transfer from one person to another, and also mean that circulations of the wealth enduring from any spoils or wealth, for that matter, shouldn't be confined to few people, such as the transferring from only within the same group of people. It has to be circulated in the market. And in order to protect the circulation of wealth, Islamic law actually allowed many types of contracts in businesses and commercial dealings, right, as well as the charities to be operated in the market right? And then by various types of freedom in doing the contracts with limitations, as well as the observance on the value propositions that we have in Sharia. In terms of preservation and protection of the wealth in business transactions, preservation of wealth is basically one of the primary maqasid in Sharia, and as written in the Al-Quran, saying that, "Oh, you believe, who have attained the faith, do not devour one another's possession wrongfully, not even by way of trade, based on mutual agreement, and do not destroy one another," which is in verse 4, ayah 29. And this has been supported by the hadith of the Prophet. No Muslim's property should be allowed to be taken from him without his own accord. And the preservation of protection of the wealth in Islam is basically is an important tool as one of the elements under the maqasid Sharia. And the right to own and earn is basically the Sharia Islam give the right to the Muslim community to own and earn, as well as to create wealth, as well as transparency in wealth and finance. So the transparency is one of the very important objectives in Sharia, especially in dealing with business and finance, and to avoid disputes, as well as the litigations in future. So we have to be transparent and honest in dealing. In terms of development and investment of wealth business transaction, the wealth is not an option, but it is an obligation because it is helping to grow the wealth and protecting the property of the society. And the prevention of harm and hardship is actually in wealth and finance. Sharia is trying to achieve comprehensive communal prosperity in the society. However, by making this achievement, every member civil society will be enjoying satisfaction and secured. As a result of this all type of harm and hardship will be eliminated. And one of the major objectives in Sharia is to prohibit riba, whether it is riba nasi'ah or riba al-fad. And those who eat riba, as written in the Quran, will not stand on the day of resurrection, except like the standings of a person beaten by shaitan, leading to him to insanity. That is because they say trading is only like riba, whereas Allah has permitted trading and forbidden riba. The establishment of justice and equity in Islamic economy and finance is basically based on the prohibition of monopoly. Next slide, Prof. Prohibition of majority, major uncertainty, and prohibition of duress. Or ikrah, prohibition of inequality, rubun fahish, or rubun, any more under rubun fahish, where the transaction will be considered as void if it is involved rubun fahish, and the taghrir, as well as the gharar or uncertainty, and tadlis elements. Now, going for the SDG 16, to promote, next slide, to promote peaceful and inclusive society for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Basically, Islamic finance can help in all the elements of the to promote the betterment as well as the improvement, and we prohibits any act of violence, even not even to children but to everyone. And as we look at the data from the United Nations itself, overcrowded in prison. Almost 60% of the countries having the problems of overcrowded in prison, and this may cause more problems in terms of COVID-19, and because of no social distancing, as if like we have no solutions to these problems. As a matter of fact, this has been told by us in one of the during the Battle of Badr, when the Prophet was asked about the prisoners of war, and if we were to throw them or put them in the prison, then they will not give any benefits. So invention is that they have to bring out their skills and to teach the Muslims community, as well as to not to burden the government to, whenever we have prison or inmates. I believe, I still remember when I was in 2000, we have done some research, the prison overcrowded in Malaysia, and one inmate has cost about the, at that time was 15 ringgit. 50 ringgit, 10 to 50 ringgit. And we have 46,000 inmates in that particular year. So every day the government spend about 10 to 15 ringgit for every inmate. And we just imagine and calculate if this, if it is for day, it become how much it will cost the government and the taxpayers' money, as well as it will turn to millions when it comes to weeks as well as monthly cost. Prison is not a solution because of sustainable development goals, and it will not recycle the talent and human capital as promoted under the SDG 8. And the Islamic Finance can help and can assist in this matter by looking into various alternatives. For example, that one of the research that we have done, I think one of the professors from Terengganu also have mooted the idea of having prison industry, and I have also written several articles on the prison industry. Because once, if you go this, our overcrowded prison may cause social problems as well to the family that they left behind, the wife and the kids, and the wife will tend to do or to get involved in the immoral activities, just to, because they become the sole breadwinner for the family. And something needs to be done to cater this prison overcrowded. And we have the principles and the examples led during the Battle of Badr. And I believe we can reinvent more models to cater these minorities, even though it is minorities. But if we refer to California Prison Act and California prison system, they have actually have the prison industry that can sustain on their own, and they can even pay the salary of their wardens, management and maintenance of the whole prison systems. Looking forward for that. And this prison overcrowded is not only it's actually become the talk of the town when we talk about the restorative justice concept. When you have to restore back damages that you have caused to the society. And this restorative justice actually a good platform as well to handle the systematic way of catering the damages or the crime that we have counted today. And next is basically, Prof, next slide, thank you. On the SDG Goal 17 is on the strengthening the means of implementations and revitalizing the goal partnership for sustainable development. And we have altogether 7 elements under this Goal 17. Mine is more on the financial inclusion and trade, as well as finance. As what we can see here is the financial inclusion. The system, the banking system that we have today is not meant to include everyone in the financial system. As well as the WTO principles. Let me go one by one. The process or the financing that was addressed in the paragraph 253 to 268 of the outcome of the United Nations Conference on SDG, we can see they have the tagline, the motto that the future that we want is to have everybody, no one is left behind, especially for the financial inclusion. What do they say is that the need for significant mobilization of resources from a variety of resources and effective use of financing in order to give strong support to developing countries in their efforts to promote sustainable development, including through actions they undertaken in accordance with the outcome of the United Nations Conference on the Sustainable Development and for achieving sustainable development goals. If the system of financial system that we have today is basically is not fit to include everyone. Why? Because we have the bankable community and unbankable community. Some use the term underbank, but I'm more convenient to use the word unbankable and bankable community. The current setup of financial institutions doesn't allow the financial access to all community, such as the unbankable community. Why? Because they always see from the perspective of risk. Now, the traditional banking system that we have today actually was not designed for poor people in developing countries. And every second that adult in this world is unbanked, meaning they lack of access to services such as loans or getting financing. 2.3 billion adults and 1.7 billion do not have a bank account and thereby they are unbanked. Financial exclusions actually entails people lacking access to affordable financial services to meet their needs. And 60% of the people in developing countries have a bank account. But when they have bank account, doesn't mean that they have an access to other vital financial services such as loans, financing, transactions, or insurance. And most people in developing countries are financially unreserved, which hugely impact their quality of life and chances of surviving or escaping poverty. And the financial inclusion basically becomes also the main agenda. Next slide. In the to achieve the SDG by 2030. As what we can see, the Organization of the Economic, Cooperative and Development, OECD, have issued a policy paper among the Arab countries to stand up for the SDG and mobilize innovation forms of financing. And what were they discussing was on the wakaf, sedekah, zakat, murabaha, mudarabah, and musyarakah. Do they need to discuss all this? Because they need it. Islam has never created any exclusive any exclusion in financial access when we provide wakaf, zakat and sadaqah for everyone. But in a matter that this has not been industrialized and we call it not being commercialized, more on domestic nature, on wakaf, sadaqah and zakat. No one is left behind. And I believe this is the future that we want. So there are other types of business platforms that Islamic Finance has provided to cater different levels of people, for the rich as well as for the poor. Because everyone should enjoy the access to and the rights to the wealth, as what we have discussed in the maqasid just now. And in terms of financial inclusion, next slide, we can see that it featured a target in 8 of the 7 goals. Next slide. And this goal is basically to discuss the eradicating poverty, ending hunger, promoting health and well-being, SDG 5, which I reserve and I mark it in red. Definitely having the gender equality. We want to have the same right of employment as men. Yes, we can have that, but to some extent, to have the on something which is the values which is not Sharia compliance, we need to reserve it. And promoting economic growth and jobs, SDG 9, supporting industries, innovation, infrastructures. SDG 10 is to reduce inequality, and 17, the SDGs that we are talking now, and needs a lot of support from not only from the banks, but also support from the different institutions. Like for example, in Malaysia, the wakaf, the zakat, actually falls under the hands of the Majlis Agama Islam Negeri. And they can do more beyond whatever that they are currently doing. Because Islamic Finance or Muamalat Islam is so big, especially in terms of social financing. When we always shift the burdens to financial institutions, we fail to look at the most important elements that lies within the jurisdictions of the states. States must be more innovative and creative, by inventing tools to be, progressively moving forward to help and eradicate poverty as well as to have the financial inclusions. I'm aware some of the Majlis Agama Islam are doing quite a good job by having providing platforms and access to the mu'allaf and to some of the other unbankable communities. But we have to do more. We need it to be commercialized. In one of the paper, I did propose to have the Zakat Bank. And this Zakat Bank should be materialized in terms of, because we do not want to behave like a bank. Bank's behavior is different from the social banks, especially when you want to introduce Wakaf Bank or Zakat Bank. And this Zakat Bank should actually will help the call it unbankable or underprivileged people to improve their life. And we can see that if we park the social or the zakat, call it social finance, in the hands of the bank, they will behave like a bank. For example, they will charge according to the they charge, and those, as well as they will need to comply with certain rules and regulations. So we need alternative institutions to make sure that the poor as well as people in need really assisted by the because this zakat money and wakaf or cash wakaf is basically comes from the public. So from public, they have to go back to public. And when we go to the bank as well, financial inclusion is basically something that, if I may say, is quite unrealistic to shift all those liabilities to the bank or to the financial institutions per se. And next slide. And we can see that with heavy regulations and high costs related to money handling that incur high overheads, and this means that their services become more costly, and the banks in developing countries has focused on the higher income segments, and many lower income households do not even consider themselves as potential customers for the bank. And the cost of opening bank account and transaction fees also make traditional banking services too expensive for some people. And we can see services are made even more expensive by traveling cost, as a large amount of the populations, often 80% in the developing countries, living in the rural areas far from the bank. And it is also costly and inconvenient for the people to use the bank for their regular savings. This basically, for example, like if I want to apply for loan or financing from the bank, they need to see my credit worthiness, one, and then second, they need to see my credit card history. And for the unbankable community, definitely this is not something that they can afford to do. Next is on the financial inclusion. The key to financial inclusion. Next slide. Is to have next slide. Next slide. The availability as well as the regulations and relevance. In terms of availability, the systems that we have, financial system that we have today must cater the needs, makes products more transparent and available for those who are in need, and not merely inventing products which is meant for the rich, but also applies for the poor. It's like the interest rate for the rich also applicable for the poor, which is not something which is we need to be improved and amended, I believe. So in terms of regulations, we see that, for example, like KYC, know your customer. Every bank has these elements of KYC, and they need to monitor all those credit worthiness, selling features, or whether they are worth to be given financing or not. And the research from the United Nations has indicated that more than 60% of the population in this world doesn't have the identity card. It's like we have the because they are maybe they are someone that left behind from the development, and this can also cause problems to financial inclusions. And next is in terms of relevancy. relevancy from the market needs, right, as well as the needs from the community. If we provide loans for low incomes, then we need to make sure that the interest or the profits that they have charged, as well as the needs to cater for a poor or the needy persons are catered, and we also have to make sure that it is really relevant for the different market segments. And for the relevancy as well as the availability, we must make this as one of our goals and agenda in the banking systems, to make sure that we are dealing with different layers of community, and we must be aware that these different communities are having different needs and their own targets, and do not treat the needy or the poor person as what we have been treating the community of corporate people, and on equal footing. So we have to make sure that they are treated differently and having relevance as well as the availability of the products should be catered differently. Right. Next slide. Now, for Islamic finance, is it a solution? We can see that Islamic finance has the financial inclusion become the main goal in Islamic muamalat, where the basic principles always be on the prohibitions of riba, gharar, and maisir. And we always aware that riba actually causes the rich become richer and poor become poorer. And in order to eliminate the injustice in this society, riba should be eliminated, as well as the involvement in any uncertainties activities of gharar and maisir. And from the Islamic finance, we have actually designed the products differently to cater the needs of different market segments in terms of sale-based, equity-based, lease-based, amana-based, security-based, and fee-based, as well as tabarruk and the hybrid. And we can see that the tabarruk, or the something that we give out we give out, but never expect anything in return. This is tabarru'at. We give it for, and then we expect nothing out of it. It is for charitable purposes. And the objective of the contract, or the muqtada al-aqad, is basically to get reward. Even if we provide financing, so it's actually, or we provide, not financing, it's basically to provide qard or loan, is also considered as tabarru'at, because initially when we give, it becomes the tabarru'at contract, and when we get the exchange, or when we pay back and we are paid back, then it is considered as an exchange contract. And we have also takaful, sadaqah, zakat, hibah, and qard, wakaf, all placed under this tabarru'at. So this money should be given for more useful purposes, and need to have some sort of invention and innovation on how to manage the fund and distribute the funds. And the ethics and in Islamic finance, comes under the 5 fundamentals of necessities. Next slide. It is the Maqasid Sharia approaches to protect the religion, protection of ad-din, to protect the life, to protect the nasal, to protect the intellect and akal, and to protect the property. And with these 5 necessities, the objective of Sharia is always to guide these 5 elements. And I believe SDG from 1 to 17 actually cater all this, except to some extent we believe, because SDG comes from the Westernist approaches and perspective, and the values might be a little bit of different as compared to the what we believe in the protection of ad-din and life. And next is basically on the as we refer to the next slide, the zakat, sadaqah, and wakaf basically comes under these slide number 26. It comes under this obligatory form of charity, and one of the 5 pillars in Islam. And this has been recorded in chapter 60, verse 60, chapter 9, that zakat is aimed for the poor, the needy, to those who have recently embraced Islam in order to free the slave, and also to support debtors, al-gharimin, and in the cause of Allah or fi sabilillah, and to support the travelers stranded far from home. And we can see that, for example, in Brunei, we have some an order or mandates from the High Majesty to pay, because we have so much money of the zakat that has not been allocated, and they have been instructed to give out to the al-gharimin to pay their debt. And if we look into the entitlement under the zakat, we can see that the SDG, they are covering the SDG number 1, 2, 17, 8, and 16. And the sadaqah, actually the voluntary alms giving, and this those who are entitled, actually everyone who are facing difficulties or deserve, because sadaqah doesn't mean that you are facing difficulties. In case you want to build a masjid, or you want to build surau or school, you need contributions, right? So you also deserve for this kind of sadaqah. And under SDG, these values of sadaqah, right? The values and the is actually covered under these all SDGs values, except which contradict to Sharia. And wakaf is basically the endowment of property, which is made to religious, educational, and charitable causes, or anything for the sake of Allah. And this under SDG, you can see it covers all aspects except which contradict to Sharia. Next slide. And if we look at the divisions under the Islamic finance, we can see that the Islamic finance comes under the different segments: Islamic banking, takaful, capital market, and social finance, as well as now we have new things in the market. We call it cryptocurrencies, which I believe security commissions actually allowed to some extent for this kind of trading. Unbankable community, which falls under this social finance, includes of wakaf, zakat, sadaqah, and hibah. And if we look at from this structure, we can see the first layer is basically meant only for the bankable community, and unbankable comes under the second layer. However, there are also efforts from the banks currently doing the Ar-Rahnu systems, to cater the unbankable community as well. And Ar-Rahnu is actually part of the contracts or part of the systems that we have under Islamic Finance. Next. Next slide is actually showing that Bank Negara Malaysia in 2019 has issued the value-based intermediation financing and investment impact assessment framework guidance documents that providing the attainment of benefits and prevention of harm, integration of Sharia, fairness and transparency, constructive and inclusive collaboration with stakeholders, principles and governance, as well as they have the Sharia governance framework that have been issued in different standards. Now, in terms of VBI or the value-based intermediation financing, we can see that these the attainment of benefits and prevention of harm is actually one of the framework under the Islamic Finance to eradicate to eliminate harm and in the market. And we have the one of the slides that I have prepared for the framework of prevention of harm in Sharia. So next slide. To conclude, under this, before we conclude, before I forget, we have one under this SDG 17 just now talking about the trading. You know, trade currently being regulated or being monitored and supervised by the World Trade Organizations, and this WTO comes with the principles in principles on the trade at international level. So these principles sometimes causing problems for Muslim market to get an access, especially on the issue of halal. We have read some of the cases that has been debated in this WTO concerning halal imports and halal exports. And I think few weeks before Ramadan, we have been issued with a story of where France has banned halal meats from entering their market, and no halal meat can enter except it's to be stunned and to be electrocuted. And in light of this, we can see the principles of the trading markets as well need to recognize to some extent the acceptance and norms and beliefs of certain communities, and do not simply or robustly using or apply their principles to all the markets or to all the member countries, because some member countries cannot accept the when halal is treated to be treated under this providing technical barrier to trade. And that is one of the issue that we might want to point out. Okay, to conclude, my conclusion number one is basically financial institutions are not only the institutions that hold values and principles in muamalat. I believe the systems and principles that must have all these concerted efforts from different players, such as Muslim religious councils and the different peoples as well, to make sure it is being promoted from end to end. And we can see this is actually supported by the Maqasid Sharia. Conclusion number two, next slide, is basically Islamic finance emphasizes inclusion from various dimensions and prohibits any act of discrimination against any individual premise on the principles and values in Sharia. And Islamic finance industry should be innovative and creative, inventing product and system that viable for everybody, not merely selective. And Ar-Rahnu is the best concept currently to cater the unbankable, but we need more innovations. And this Ar-Rahnu cannot be translated into a profit-making mechanism and burdensome to customers. We can see some of the provisions or some of the operations in the market imposing high charge to this Arahnu, and they have some technical difficulties for the customers. And for conclusion number 3, the overall concept, we believe the SDG is actually to make the world a better place to live. But to some extent, this good initiative must be cautioned and read together with the principles and values of Sharia. Anything that promotes Sharia, non-compliant agenda, shall not be within the purview of Islamic finance or Islam in general. The human rights shall not be read, for example, under the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights alone. It has to be read together with the Cairo Declarations on Human Rights and various propositions and bids from the Sharia perspective. So I believe that is actually my 3 conclusions that I can make out of these presentations. And all the goods come from Allah, and all weaknesses come from my own weaknesses. And this, I hope, I thank you once again, UTM, for inviting me, Prof. Rostam, Prof. Moderator, and I invite for any questions and for me to answer, inshallah.
Okay, participants, any questions? You can post your question in the chat room, and I can actually read to Dr. Hakimah. Anyone wants to ask any question? Maybe I can start off first. Dr. Hakimah, can you share any specific example that the Islamic financial institution has actually championed any particular SDG? You mentioned about the unbankable specifically, and then in general the SDG. So do you know, can you share any specific examples that the Islamic financial institution has actually championed or drive?
Basically, the Islamic banking started off with this Arahnu concept because in the market we have the pawnbroking system that impose interest, high interest on the customers. So when the Arahnu comes into the market, it's actually provide the more convenient for the customers, for the unbankable community to come and settle their financing needs. Now, if we see in Malaysia, the rights to sell off the items when you found your assets, they will done there and there by given the rights to the Arahnu entity to sell it off. But to some countries, for example, like in Brunei, they have to go to court to get an order and everything. So to go to court is more costly, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they have these in the provisions rather than going to court. They prefer the bank sell it off on their own, right? But those are the different mechanisms that we see to some extent. Some is facilitating, but to some extent, it also cause some sort of difficulties for the customers to accept the fact that they need to, hire the lawyer and then go and sell it, and then to get an order from the court. Those are some of the problems. And another championing is that I believe Islamic Finance is actually also championing in terms of giving moratorium during COVID-19. We have been committed to give moratorium. Previously when COVID-19 attacked the country in Malaysia, even in Brunei, Bank Islam actually started to have the moratorium and given the free holiday payment payment holiday lah. So for the customers, I believe Malaysia has been given the longest period now. It's actually comes from up to 1 year now. From 6 months, then we extended to 1 year. And there's also a lot of other activities that Bank Islam has been doing so far in terms of providing green sukuk. I couldn't remember what kind of sukuk is that. But for the betterment of the community, we have the social responsible sukuk as well. I think if I were to list down, then we have a lot, Prof. We have a lot, yeah.
Okay, right. Okay. I thought there's a question here. Okay. Any other questions? That was from me. Maybe Dr. Rostam wants to ask a question as well.
Okay, I got a question. I mean, I'm definitely not an expert in Islamic finance or any finance. I mean, like from your slide, I can see that it is very good, especially for the unbankable community. I mean, like everything seems, I mean, like beneficial to everyone, no one left behind, according to, I mean, whatever motto that being set by United Nations. But then from the statistics, you can see, like you say, 60% of the populations don't have a bank account or access to the bank and so on. So what is the sort of like, I mean, when we talk about Islamic finance, and we know like country like Malaysia and Brunei, their official religion is Islam. But then the challenges or probably obstacles to implement, I mean, all the good things that you have explained in your slide, why it's not like really happening? I mean, for the case, maybe not so much in Brunei, slightly less in Malaysia, but we see a lot of people in hardships, for example, in the most populated country in the world like Indonesia. So why it is not happening? What is the challenges and the obstacles? Thank you.
Yeah, in Malaysia, in particular in Malaysia, I can see because of the regulation. If you start to regulate zakat, wakaf and sedekah, you cannot grow compared to Indonesia. Malaysia tak ada regulations. There's no regulations on zakat, sedekah. So that's why zakat, they are championing in terms of zakat in charitable activities, and as well as the wakaf and sedekah. And as we see, even in Azhar as well, University of Azhar has become prosperous due to the fact that it is come from the wakaf money, and due to lack of regulations. Why am I ridiculing or am I not agreeing to the regulations? No, but to some extent, the regulations that we give to the Majlis Agama Islam is some sort of like due to the fact that I can see. They are lacking in terms of bukan anak. I don't want to undermine them. Lacking in terms of how they want to the expertise of to manage the fund, and how do they want to distribute funds. Another thing is that the problem still exists is due to the fact that we can see we are so fond to the financial system. We are so attracted to the financial system. Everything we go to the bank, and this becomes the main problem. If we notice anything that comes from the government, they want to help the SME. They will channel the money to the bank, right? They will channel the money to the bank, and be the bank. They will always be the bank, right? And they will treat this. If you pay to delay in making payments within the 2 months, and then you will be declared, the asset will be withdrawn, will be repossessed, and then will be charged bankrupts, etc. So that's the behavior of the bank is always like that. And in terms of the as I said, we must need concerted efforts. If you see zakat money collection from one state to another state is huge. Johor and Selangor itself can more than millions more than millions, that can even make up a capital of a bank. You see, and wakaf land in Penang itself cost 1 billion. Wakaf land in Penang itself, 1 billion. And what have we done with the wakaf land so far? Right? To generate the economy, for the Muslim community, to give the benefits of this wakaf for the benefits of the Muslim community. And we see regulations, because this has been mandated under the Majlis Agama and within the states, and yet they need to be innovative in terms of how they want to manage the asset, to get more funds, and to have more people, because this is not their money, this is public money. Public money need to be distributed and go back to public, right? And they may get some of the portions of ujra or upa or what call it, the management fees, in order to manage those funds. Those are my answers, Prof. Yeah.
Mungkin Prof punya
Sorry. Okay, sorry. All right, I forgot about unmuting. Okay, so thank you for an interesting sharing, Dr. Hakimah. This is from Cik Bon. I am not sure whether or not my question relates to your presentation today. How do you see the biodiversity, i.e. ecosystem, kelestarian alam as a commodity? What is the pros and cons? Thank you very much.
Biodiversity in terms of ecosystem, you mean to be treated as commodity?
Yeah, that is the question.
Okay. I'm not sure how the system of biodiversity or the ecosystem itself, but in terms of commodity in finance, we will normally do it, we take it from the CPO, crude palm oils, metals, those can be treated as commodities. But if it is for commodities, I'm not really understand how the biodiversity works. I'm so sorry, Mr. Cik Bon, but maybe we'll try to look something out of it, inshallah. Yeah, I dare not to say it is viable to become a commodity, but I need to understand more in order to answer these questions. Yes. Mr. Cikgu, you might want to have my contact number from Dr. Rustam. Maybe we can have a more discussion later, yeah?
Okay, very interesting question actually, kelestarian alam.
That's it, kelestarian alam is actually part of the ecosystem and part of the discussion under SDG. But to make it as a commodity means we are referring to something that valuable. But maybe in future, why not? But in terms of, there's many factors like industry acceptance and everything that must have some sort of. Are we looking for monetary values of the commodities, or are we looking for the sustainable values of the commodities? Those also can be points that need to be considered here.
Yeah, I am a strong believer in biodiversity.
Okay.
We are now in the midst of negotiating a project with Tasik Kenyir on biodiversity of Tasik Kenyir, because from our perspective, the biodiversity, especially in terms of sustaining the community around Tasik Kenyir, that is considered as very important as well. So that is from my perspective. Yeah.
Maybe we can issue the green sukuk to maintain and preserve the Tasik Kenyir project. Yeah, for the and then utilization of the profits that come from the investors can be done to maintain and to manage the project, inshallah.
Yeah. Any other question?
Yeah,
Sorry?
just while waiting for the questions, I would like to also add on the value of the wakaf. We see our government in Malaysia is basically keep changing. And I'm not trying to be politic, but we, whether we aware or not, whenever one government step in, a new government step in, our assets of the states as reducing due to the fact some of it being sold out to others, either corporates or other countries. What am I proposing is one day we might want to have the wakaf on this, all the assets belongs to the government. So whenever the new government comes in, they just become the trustee to manage the funds only, or manage the assets. That's my proposal. Since we're talking in terms of in related areas of wakaf. So no one is allowed to, no new governments can sell off without, things, and then again get the whole community can benefit from those assets. So, and Prof, tak ada question ni, no question.
Setakat ni tak ada lagi soalan. So far saya dengan Dr. Rostam yang tanya. Very technical ni, Dr. Hakimah.
Technical.
Orang-orang biodiversity ni dia tengok finance ni dia jadi different perspective agaknya.
Same like me lah, it's vice versa. If I look at the biochemical biodiversity, my mind will be twisted as well.
Hello, hi, my name is Ellen. I'm from UiTM Sarawak. So I have one question. I would like to hear your view, Dr. Hakimah, on cryptocurrency. Yes.
My view?
Yes, on cryptocurrency in relation to perhaps Islamic finance. Or do you, because I heard the last line in your conclusion saying that perhaps this cryptocurrency doesn't fall in the category of Islamic finance at all. So I would like to hear your opinion. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the question. Basically, cryptocurrencies, in my personal opinion, despite of anything, any developments happens outside, cryptocurrencies, historically, from when we heard about new things or new terms, I always love to go and dig out the historical perspective of it. And crypto comes from the word encryption. And the word is being encrypted, all those symbols being encrypted. And it started since Babylon nations. And it's being developed for the military purposes. It's as a secret code, secret coding. And there are only 2 or 3 agencies or companies, we call it, IBM, and there are 2 others from Japan that developed the coding, and for the encryption of code. So when we enter into it as a blockchain, as well as the cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Light Zone or anything, we have like 800 types of cryptocurrencies outside there. And so these cryptocurrencies basically, we have no physical touch, we couldn't see it, but we can just transact in our, call it virtual contracts or virtual dealings. So for me, cryptocurrencies, it is confirmed and guaranteed by us that this is secured because they have certain algorithm and certain keywords that only the one that possesses the code will actually have the right to decode, and they know the systems. But personally, me personally, I believe cryptocurrencies innovation. It is an innovation from the monetary system. Previously, we used money from the shells. Now we have the fiat money papers, and then now we want to go for the virtual money. And then it is decentralized. Decentralized means the Banegara or the central bank will not, control whatever activities inside those. And then we have come across with a lot of money laundering activities, with a lot of mafsada, with a lot of bad issues in terms of cryptocurrencies. I don't think this is sustainable for the to maintain sustainable for the monetary or the financial system. But on the offside of it, we can regulate. But in terms of whatever happens inside it virtually, some of the system that we cannot control and get an access to it. So it's beyond the control of central bank and beyond the control of even certain the play is inside the cryptos. So my personal opinion is that we still need to do more research. We need to have more experts in blockchain. We need more experts in cryptocurrencies. Then only we can see whether this is something that viable in Sharia or something not viable in Sharia. That's my personal opinion. We need still to study the positive and negative effect of it. I hope this answers the questions.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Any other questions? Prof?
So far, I cannot see any.
Assalamualaikum.
Bismillah.
Okay. Prof, I have one question, Dr. Hatimah.
Ya, apa khabar? Geng lama.
Ya, Dr. Sharifah Faikah. Ya.
Yes. Okay. Because I noticed that you have mentioned about value-based intermediation in Islamic banks that we have been practicing. So if you may explain further the difference between VBI, value-based intermediation, and SDG from the financial perspective. Thank you.
Welcome. Right. Briefly explain, Doctor. Basically, the BBI are based on these ESG approaches, ESG, economic, social, and governance, while SDG comes under different platforms under the United Nations, promoting the 17 goals altogether. So where we only previously focused on the ESG, economic, social, and governance, now SDG is actually covering the whole plots of it. Even if you can see the layers, to understand better, I believe we want to refer to the I think Rockcliffe's system of layering in terms of explaining how the 17 goals works. It works from the 3 layers. The below layer is actually to protect the life on the planets as well as below the water, and then it creates the balancing. And then the second layers come from the all the SDGs goals, and the top is actually on the last SDGs on 17. It's actually partnership and cooperation from everybody to make sure that this to be materialized. I believe this is more like the more wider. SDG is more wider, while ESD, which focus based on the BBI, more focusing on those 3 elements. Yeah. And Islamic finance can go further. Banking, BBI, or anything that comes in future can be created based on the SDG goals. But we already have embedded that in Sharia, especially in terms of Sharia governance framework. We have the corporate governance framework in the financial system. As we can see that even the Deutsche banks and other banks have their own SDGs goals and motivations towards to realize the SDG. In fact, the Standard Chartered also have actually some sort of implement SDG, moving forward to SDG, then to make it more acceptable to the industry in place. Yeah, I hope this answers the questions, Prof.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Fatimah.
Welcome.
Dr. Hatimah, do you see at the end of the day, convergence, you said just now Islamic banks have rooms to grow, but do you see that now with the SDG, the BBI is going to be taken over by SDG?
I don't say
an integration.
More integrate lah, rather than taking over. It's more like a merger lah. Integration.
A merger.
Merger.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe because now since SDG is getting more prominence, and especially now with the unbankable, so it actually reflects more on the SDG rather than the ESG.
Yeah. One thing is that we have to make sure under SDG, there are few values, principles that cannot be tolerated in Sharia, especially on the transgender rights, those gender equality. We cannot accept. Sharia won't be recognized. So that's why some of the elements that we need to, cannot accept and cannot recognize, we cannot accept. To some extent, I believe the SDG is more suitable for the banks because they are more on corporate nature of businesses. But at the same time, they're also moving forwards to have the green financing, and all sort of good things coming in to also realize and materialize the concepts and the principles of SDG. More on the merger, not on the taking over.
Okay. What I'm trying to say is not really taken over, like getting less important.
Yeah. Can integrate lah, insyaAllah. They need to integrate lah.
Yeah. Okay. I cannot see any other questions. Maybe you can ask direct questions to Dr. Hatimah, participants. Besides a moratorium and things that you have highlighted just now, Dr. Hatimah, what else do you think that the Islamic banks or the social finance, especially the Islamic social finance, can do to actually work with other agencies in the country, be it in Brunei, be it in Malaysia, to actually revive the economy?
We can do International Wakaf Foundation, and then we also can have the some of the ideas that whenever we want to help poor people, we always go to the NGOs. We always rely on the NGOs because basically the government also need to some sort of like have this to be sort of make it another level. Don't always go and rely on the NGO alone to do good things. For example, like we can have the International Wakaf. We must have the Bank of Sadaqah. It can work. The thing is more on the regulatory structure. For example, like if you want to do the concept of Bank of Sadaqah, then you will be struck under these taxation issues. Tax issues. So must have a sort of like easiness to make sure that this social finance should be worldwidely or acceptable, even within the community as well as from the regulatory structure. So from taxation, for example, that you cannot grow if the money keep being, need to be distributed within those year of taxation, and then we need to, have limitations in terms of investment as well. So we need to make sure that this is something that viable for the concept of sedekah, and viable as well also for the concept of how to generate more income for the community. That's my humble observation. Any other questions?
Organizer, so far I cannot see any questions.
Yeah.
Okay, I think if there is no more questions, then probably we can end our session here.
There's one, Prof, question in the chat box asking
Valuation of ecosystem.
the SDG from conventional perspective. Is it in line with Maqasid Sharia in Islam, which is holistic?
Of course, I don't have the question.
Maybe it's privately or it sends privately. Let me answer.
Yeah,
Allow me to answer, Prof. Do you think the SDG from the conventional perspective is in line with the Maqasid Sharia in Islam, which is holistic? Thank you, Brother Muhammad Azwan. Basically, from the beginning, I have been spoken to Dr. Rostam and Prof. It's like SDG coming from the United Nations, and it's actually invention from the United Nations with having the 17 goals, while the Maqasid Sharia is basically more holistic in nature. We have some of the principles and the goals that under the SDG are not in line with the Sharia elements and values, especially on the women's rights. Yes, you can empower women, but to some extent, you also need to make sure that the values and the Sharia that we actually have need to be upheld. Yeah, and to some extent, the transgender rights and more on the LGBT, which is quite sensitive, and if we see the equality, if I'm not mistaken, is SDG number 5, talk about the equality of the different genders, which is not in line with Sharia, and these inventions coming from the Westerners, and we see we follow values which is in line with our values, and some of the values yang not Sharia compliant, so we need to have our reservations. Yeah. I believe I have answered that, Dr. Rustam and Prof. Any other questions?
Okay, probably there is no more questions. I think probably we can stop our session here. Right? But I think before we end the session, I want all the participants to on their video or on the camera so that we can take a group photo before we end the session. Switch on your video, your camera please. Okay, I mean I have only half screen on camera on my screen, so I hope more people can like switch on their cameras or on the video. Okay, smile, 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 everybody smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah. I would like to thank Prof moderator and Dr. Hakimah. Dr. Hakimah probably like I will text you or probably call you personally after this. I think thanks everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Hakimah.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum semua. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hakimah.